Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the educational sector, the educational file, one of the most integral files and sectors here in Egypt. Now, this is in light of the presidency actually pushing for a full support to develop the public educational system, that is by developing national projects connected to the public universities and the educational system as a whole. But before we start discussing this integral topic, let's check out some of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi instructing today on fixing the state's approach by managing its resources, lands and facilities across governorates as a constant strategy for the state. During the meeting with Interior Minister Mahmoud Tawfiq, Minister of Public Business Sector Hisham Tawfiq, Major General Amir Said Ahmed, the Presidential Advisor for Urban Planning, the President also directed to achieve the maximum possible economic and investment revenue for assets affiliated to the public sector, to consolidate the state's approach to good management for what it owns. Presidential spokesman Bassem said the meeting tackled reviewing the plans of the Ministry of Public Enterprise Sector for the optimum utilization and development of assets and lands belonging to business sector companies at the level of the state. During the meeting, the head of state was also briefed on efforts to count unexploited assets in the public business sector, especially land areas, and measures planned to be implemented in order to maximize benefits from them. Also today, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi mourned the Chadian President Idriss Déby Itno, who was killed today on the battlefield in a fight against rebels on Tuesday. In a message, the President sent his deepest condolences to the Chadian people and all Africans for the death of Déby, the national and wise leader who exerted his utmost efforts for the sake of his nation and in serving African causes and dealing with many challenges. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli headed a high-level delegation to the Libyan capital Tripoli on Tuesday. During the visit, Madbouli held talks with head of the Libyan National Unity Government, Abdelhamid Dbeibeh, over a number of issues of mutual concern, before the two premiers held a joint press conference. Madbouli and Dbeibeh also signed a number of cooperation agreements in various domains. The delegation includes ministers of electricity, petroleum, manpower, education, international cooperation and health, communications, housing, transportation, civil aviation and trade, as well as head of the State Investment Authority and a number of representatives of investors and concerned bodies. And now we're joined over the phone by Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Chairman of the Arab Investors Union, to shed more light on the visit of Prime Minister Madbouli to Libya. Mr. Ambassador, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Ambassador. Now, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli headed a high-level delegation, signed many memorandums of understanding with Libyan officials. How important is such a visit during this process that Libya has been undertaken for a little while, up until their elections that are slated for the end of the year?
Very, very important. And if we tell a newly serving diplomat what are the most important circles of our foreign relations, immediately the first circle is the neighbor countries, talking here about Sudan, about Libya and Palestine. Then the Arab fold, of course, and so on. Libya is very important. We never missed the point to give all the signs to Libya that we are there, supporting them, supporting their unity. We cannot tolerate a divided Libya at all. We used to have 2 million Egyptians living in Libya and helping its development. And this is very important. And the good news today that we are going to encourage Egyptians to go back to their work in Libya. I personally, not as a diplomat, as a simple Egyptian citizen, I am dreaming of establishing a sort of economic union between Egypt, Libya, and Sudan. This is the immediate border of Egypt, and I think there is sort of complementary power in each of those countries to establish a very good cooperation among those countries. And it's impressive that the delegation accompanying our Prime Minister is 11 ministers. This is a huge delegation, and we heard that each minister has signed already a sort of an agreement in its field, whether it is education, it is health, it is whatever Libya would need. We are not hesitate to help our brothers in Libya. The Libyan question is a little bit easier than the situation in Yemen or in Syria, for instance, because Libya, it has a good point and it's a weak point at the same time. That Libya is a rich country, it's an oil country, and this makes Libya can tolerate any burdens of the development cost. Same time, the problem of a rich country that other foreign forces are greedy to come to make use of this. And this is another security challenge that we are trying to make sure that all the terrorists who went to Libya, and it is thousands of terrorists, are there threatening the security of this country. We are going to make sure that they will leave the country. And I am optimistic because Egypt is there now. We are going to help our brothers there to clean their country from any interference. And let us hope that gradually and as soon as possible we shall have one unified government in Libya for the sake of all the parties in Libya and for the sake of every citizen in Libya.
Yes. Your Excellency, it seemed like a few months ago Libya was a battlefield, and now the political process is really has been speeding up, picking up pace and moving forward, not just with Egypt but also international countries from the international community have been doing their own visits, promising with their own cooperation for the development process in Libya. Do you feel that we can actually see a safe, secure, established, developing Libya, maybe even before the end of the year, before their elections in December?
Let us hope that this will take place. And today also we have some good news coming from the United Nations, because the United Nations decided to send 16 observers units to see how the situation is going on, to make sure that all the foreign interference is going out, to make sure that an election near the end of the year will take place with all transparency. And the European Union is very keen to help Libya. The NATO is asking this country who is interfering in Libya to withdraw. So all the forces of the world, thank God that all of us are on the same track to help our Libyan brothers, and let us hope that as soon as possible we shall see a totally different country coming back to its full force to develop its economy, to work for the sake of every Libyan citizen, because as I said before, Libya doesn't need any finance from abroad or some, all what Libya is in need is its security, its technical cooperation from countries in the size of Egypt or the European Union, and all those who are seeking the development of Libya for the sake of Libyan themselves.
Mr. Ambassador, you've mentioned that the situation in Syria and Yemen is a little bit different than Libya. Now, You've pointed out that one of the major differences between the situation in Libya and the ones in Yemen and Syria is the financial situation. Libya is better off financially and can withstand the economic burdens that it is going through. But do you not see, or the situation, the political leaders and factions within Syria and Yemen, can't they follow up on a goodwill or maybe follow up a political will to solve their own issues and bridge some of those differences to reach some sort of political solution as it is taking place in Libya?
This is a very important point, that the worst thing a country face, that it is divided into different parties, and each party, instead of trying to negotiate with his own citizen, they are asking the help of foreign forces. So can you count how many foreign forces are dominating the situation in Syria? You have the Iranian, you have the Turkish, you have the American, you have the French, name it. So the decision at the end of the day will not be for the Syrian parties. It will be for the sake of every foreign force represented there, and this is makes the situation much more difficult and much more complicated, unless we can encourage the Syrians themselves to come to reason, to come to the negotiation table, whether in Cairo or anywhere in the world. And I think Egypt and Cairo is a very acceptable face to the Syrian. Same thing applies to Yemen, where you have several forces fighting each other, and the citizens of the country are the victims of all of this. Unless the citizen of Syria and the citizen of Yemen recognize that their unity is the first target to reach, we shall be still to wait until we reach this point.
Yes. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Chairman of the Arab Investors Union, thank you very much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, the final story for today. Also, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry arrived in Congo's capital Kinshasa on Tuesday on the fourth leg of his African tour on Tuesday. Earlier in South Africa, Shoukry delivered a message from President Sisi to South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa over developments to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam file and Cairo's stance regarding the issue. Shoukry said Egypt appreciates efforts by South Africa in the GERD file during its chairmanship of the African Union. The top diplomat also reviewed the meeting with the South African leader, the outcome of the latest meetings in Kinshasa, the DR Congo. He said Egypt has proved during the meetings that it has a genuine political will to reach a serious negotiation path that would lead to a binding legal deal over the operation and filling of the dam, one that would achieve the interests of the three countries and preserve their water rights. Shoukry's stop in South Africa was the latest in a tour that included a number of African countries to deliver messages from President Sisi to their respective leaders over developments to the GERD file and Cairo's stance with regards to the issue. These were some of the stories making the news today, but now let's focus on our topic in hand regarding the public educational system. Now let's check out this report regarding President Sisi emphasizing the importance and the keenness of developing the public educational system and developing universities nationwide. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has directed the government to provide full support to the public education system through expanding national projects nationwide. This came during President el-Sisi's meeting with the Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research Khalid Abdel Ghaffar, Governor of Cairo Khalid Abdel Al, and Major General Amir Saeed Ahmed, the advisor to the President of the Republic for Urban Planning, as well as Dr. Mahmoud Al-Matini, the President of Ain Shams University. During the meeting, the President directed the full support to be provided to the public education system to achieve the targeted quality of education by pursuing further national projects for the public university system nationwide. In this context, the head of state directed the government to develop and fully replan Ain Shams University Hospitals area within the framework of establishing Ain Shams Medical City. The President also directed that the necessary financial allocations be made available for this vital project that will serve thousands of patients, and that the main axis of Abbasiyya Square and the area be developed to end traffic congestion and facilitate the movement of university students and citizens. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Bassem said that the meeting had tackled the state's efforts to develop public universities. Dr. Khalid Abdel Ghaffar reviewed 427 current and future projects totaling about £36 billion in public universities. These projects are distributed over 27 governorate universities nationwide and are divided into service, treatment and educational projects. In this respect, the Minister of Higher Education presented the execution status quo for the project aimed to develop Ain Shams University hospitals extending over an area of 57 fadans. The aim is to upgrade and expand the service provided to patients. Work in this area include development of a Demirdash Pasha Palace, raising the efficiency of the current medical facilities, and establishing new hospitals for emergency and pediatric and oncology surgeries. Additionally, the plan includes establishing modern medical facilities, developing outpatient and specialized clinics, and providing waiting areas. Moreover, the ministry showed the plan to establish a number of new public universities nationwide.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in the studio by Dr. Bassem Amar, the lead economist at the European Bank, specialized in the southern and eastern Mediterranean region. Dr. Amar, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Amar, first of all, we're talking about the public sector, the public educational system, rather. Now, the educational system is one sector that all Egyptians have been calling for developing for a few years now. And the presidency has showed its strong will and serious intentions of developing this integral sector. But it seems such a huge task. We're talking about nurseries up until higher education. Many stages. It's such a big task. How do you start developing this public sector?
Well, thank you for the question, actually. And as you just mentioned, it has been a while that the Egyptian population in general, foreign investors, waiting for a revamp of the entire education system that was kind of just lagging behind. It had been neglected, to say, for a long period of time. So now, the whole program that is being taken place now has a forward-looking perspective where we want to be with education in the coming 5 years and 25 years, actually, because it needs one generation to start from nursery all the way to educate people to cope with the new world we'll be living in 25 years from now. So we need to have a vision of what this world would look like, these mega trends we are all talking about. You know, now we have this acceleration of a digital era, pushed by COVID-19. So we are moving with this, digitization on all levels. So we need to educate our kids to be heavily adaptable to these new technologies. We talk about future production with robots and so on. So this technology will just evolve. There's no way back. It's just one way. So we need to rethink the education system to try to bring us where we would like to be. One of the main issues, is what we call a mismatch between education that we have today and the labor force that we educated and what the labor market needs. And we have this issue today. So we graduate engineers, but we need accountants, you see. So we have this. So what is happening now is a deep reflection. What do we want to become as a nation in the future? And how we get ready for it through education. But that's a long-term perspective.
Yes.
And then we have a shorter term, because we have our graduates who are here seeking job, some mismatch, and we have what is called, skills building, skills development. It's a little bit different story where we educate our graduates to the exact need of investors today. 6 months intensive training on a very specific task. We need a computer engineer, social media expert, 6 months intensive training, most probably part of it online, because online education is flourishing. All these courses have been developed by very decent universities worldwide. So you have the content, you have the material, and then you educate them, and more importantly, application. So you train them on how to deliver, how to perform. This is skills building. And then you can retool yourself. You can, for a few years, become a social media expert, and then you can evolve into, an editor, videographic, because you learn how to do this. 6 months intensive, you practice, and then you become knowledgeable enough. You work, you gain experience, and you evolve, depending on the market need. So it's a little bit kind of a reversal way of looking at things, but this is what the dynamic labor market needs today.
Yes. Okay. We'll take it one step at a time. Now, you've mentioned a certain vision that we should have for the public educational system. Before we start talking about online learning and the age of digitalization here in Egypt, which the whole country is going through, what sort of vision are we having or what sort of aim or model are we following, hopefully to reach? Are we following a European model of education, an American one, a Japanese one? Because there's been a lot of talk of different kinds of education now. Do we have a certain vision that we're actually aiming for?
Yeah, I believe what we are doing practically is an Egyptian vision, which is a blending of different best practices. One main theme of it is a Japanese, actually, because it looks at a student from a holistic point of view, from how we want this young man to serve the society in general, to help himself and to help others. So it's not an individualistic look at, I need to develop my skills to become. No, how would I fit in my society? Different approach, if you like, to education altogether. And this has been proven on the long term to help developing a nation much better. So not just one individual at a time, a whole nation. And for this you need different skills. You need to unleash potential. It's not about just learning by heart and not at all, actually. It's just developing your natural talents. So we accompany kids and we see in what field they seem to perform best. They want to become an artist, they have some skills, some talents, and we develop it in sport, in any field, mathematics. And then you have this variety of curriculum that will be versatile enough to adapt to the need to each child. And here comes the role of the teacher. So, so it's a whole new system. So educating, training, teachers is here essential. And it's being done. That's why it's taken a little bit more time. Some teachers adapt faster to the new system than others. Younger ones, because they are much more technology connected, aware, and they already learned new skills of teaching. They can do this, they can perform this very easily, if you like. Older ones who have been used to the old system might take some more time, more training, but I believe it's going to be a natural selection, a natural evolution where talented teachers are going to prevail.
Yes. Well, you took me to the next step, which is the training of the teachers. Now, it's not just the teachers, but you also need the people who are involved in the administrative work in schools, in nurseries, in schools for children with special needs. You're talking about higher education as well. Now, how long would it take to develop and train teachers, specialists, psychologists, administrative people, faculty members of all sorts of different levels of academic educational process? How long would it take to actually have a big pool of all the workforce for the educational system?
Well, if you want to develop it fully and to have it 100% performing to its best, it takes a long time. It takes years. But we can also aim for a second best, which is, again, as we're talking about skills, is to provide up best standards of skills for each of these functions that you just mentioned, psychologists, support team, admin people. So you just give them the excellent training and to, let's say, 100 people, and then you select those who really perform best. So you take the top 30, and then you really empower them to go and deliver, and to try to start with the younger, so at least, while you are training all the others. So it's intensive training, practicing, selecting the best, and empowering them, and just taking the time. So in the short term, you have a pool of maybe some schools who are being selected as a trial, and so on. And then you see in which areas of Egypt do you need this the most. In Cairo, in remote areas, because we really want education to come to each single Egyptian wherever they live. So this also needs experimentation, if you like.
And who trains them?
So you get actually trainers from abroad. It happened. I think we have a program with the World Bank, which something like $500 million. The largest program to support education in Egypt ever. And big part of it is how to train teachers, trainers, to get up to us, and to bring international experts, in the field, like, the cooperation with the Japanese system, to come and train teachers, get them up to the level, intensive training, and then we'll move on. But it needs financing, and at least we have the financing secured, which is not bad.
Well, whenever we talk about public educational system, there's always this stereotypical image of many kids crowded and crammed into a single classroom, and many university classes filled with tens and maybe even hundreds of people in one lecture hall. What is being done? I mean, I understand that we are opening a lot of new universities, talking about the university in Abu Dhabi, the Red Sea, and Alamein City, and all the new cities as well. But what is being done to solve such an issue? Because no matter how good the education is, if there are so many kids in one classroom, it's still very difficult to focus.
This is absolutely right, actually. It reminds me of my old days at, at university. In the main lecture room, if you like, or something like a few thousand. And then we have sections. And in each section, we normally should have been something like 30, 40, 50. But because we all like one specific teacher with something like 500 in the classroom, so what can you learn? But because we prefer this guy and not the other. So I understand perfectly where you come from. And that's why the idea of increasing the number of schools, definitely. Decreasing the number of student to teacher ratio.
Yes.
It's being done. It was very high. Now I think it's in the 20s, and 20s is not very large, actually, by national standards. So it had been brought down. But the idea as well is to reach students with a high level of education, the same level of public education you can get in Cairo or elsewhere, to be provided wherever they are. Because parents, by default, number one concern for them is their kids' education.
Yes.
So if they think that the other school that is 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers in the other city is better, they will tend to send their kids to this school, and it might be overcrowded and so on. So we need to just to try as much as possible to get closer to people wherever they are with decent schooling. And as you mentioned, university as well, because if you want to populate a city, you need to have schools and universities, because parents will go and live, kids will go and learn. If there is no university, people will not go. They will go to retire, because they will be wherever their kids are. This is how families in Egypt still behave, right? So I think by developing these new cities and having a decent school system that most probably, again, would be built on best standards. Don't need to reform. You are hiring from scratch, so you hire the best. So the reputational issue saying, in Alamein, you have amazing school, amazing public schools. Well, people will be willing to go and live in Alamein or Al Galala, or where, because they know there are good schools and a good university up to higher standards, where actually also education will be tailored to the need of the city. For example, we are in Galala, we have Ain Sokhna, and we have the Suez Canal Economic Zone. So this university is created to cater to the need of this zone. One example is we want to develop logistics. Well, so in this university, you will have best, excellent professors coming to teach best practices in logistics. So you go, you live, you graduate, and you are kind of securing a job, because you will have a hands-on training in this private investments. So it's just the right way of doing things. So by developing these new cities, you promote the right way of education that is not, it's difficult to reform elsewhere, if you like.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these new cities are only a part of the vision for Egypt to achieve Sustainable Development 2030. Along with it is the educational sector. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Minister of Education Tariq Shawqi said Egypt's Vision 2030 aims at providing education and training to everyone at high quality, without discrimination, and within an efficient, just, fair and sustainable institutional system that focuses on students and trainees who are able to think and use technology. The minister said the vision includes improving the quality of education to meet the international standards, adding that education process is of common responsibility and the society has to be ready to accept development in order to guarantee high-quality graduates. By 2030, the government aims to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable and quality early childhood, primary and secondary educations, and have access to quality early childhood development, care and primary education, so that they are ready for primary education, and ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational and tertiary education, including universities. By 2030, it also aims to substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills, in order for them to be employed, find decent jobs, and also help them in entrepreneurship. This in addition to eliminating gender disparities in education and ensuring equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for the vulnerable, including people with disabilities. The government is looking forward to ensuring that all youth and substantial proportion of adults, both men and women, achieve literacy by 2030.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Kamar. Now, Doctor, this revamp of the whole public educational system is quite a costly one. I mean, talking about the universities just developing existing and establishing new universities, about 27, costs the government about 36 billion Egyptian pounds. And that's the universities alone. So let alone the secondary school and primary school. Now, is this solely the responsibility of the government and the public sector, or is it then time for the private sector to come and join in and maybe invest within the educational system? And if they do, why would they opt to work in developing the public educational system and not just focus on the private educational program?
I think the ideal scenario would be a collaboration between the private sector and the public sector. We call it very often public-private partnership, the PPP famous slogan. But here, actually, education particularly, it makes perfect sense because we educate for whom? For the private sector. So they know better what they need. So by having this interrelation between the private sector on one hand, telling the public sector, I would like you to educate for me chemical engineers because we want to develop some chemical production and we have a plant of 10 billion. Okay, so what exactly do you need? And then they can finance because they need those guys. And by the way, Egyptian labor force is cheap and highly competent when well trained. So if they're not trained, they're not trained. But when they are well trained, they are brilliant. So the private investors worldwide know this. And the geographical location of Egypt in the coming years being so central and having the COVID-19 issue showing how difficult it is to ship everything from East Asia to Europe and to the US, having Egypt as a focal point for production is actually in the mind of the international investment community. In theory, Egypt should be the hub of production for the world, actually. But what we need the right qualified labor. And for this, the private sector, by financing, like it happens all over the world, shares, department, sections in different public universities, so it's a collaboration, where actually they get them to be trained the way they want them, and then they hire them. That's the way to go. So this is a very strong collaboration moving forward. On another level, we have private investment is for profit. By default, so we, as teachers of economics, we teach them to maximize profit. But actually, if you let the private sector engage in all levels of education, from nursery to universities, and we have it actually all over, by increasing their number, just the competition itself would decrease the cost. And then you will have a more accessible private education for middle class. So you will have all the level of education, and instead of having the public sector, the government, taking the burden of educating all our kids, the private sector can take part of it, because actually it will just be a natural competition, more choice. Parents will be more inclined to go to this school. We like those teachers. We like this management style. We like this approach. You have a variety. So there is a strong room actually with the growth in income in Egypt, and this is something is happening and it's going to increase even more in the coming 2 to 10 years. It's going to be really a strong trend, really. And this will help the middle class flourishing and seeking something else. I want my kids to get perfect English. So I want them to put in this school to get this linguistic skill, if you like, and to perform better. So this mix between fully private investment and collaboration between the private sector and the government in education, especially higher education, is the way to go. And I think it is happening, but we need more of it.
And do you see in the near future, however you define near, a serious competition between public education and private education?
I see the competition starting between private education. So this will happen. But the government's role is to initiate something. You are in a new city, you are in a new capital, you are in Alamein, you are in Galala. You need to create your own schools, because if you wait for private sector to come, maybe it might take several years, and you don't want this. You have a strategy, you need to do it, and we do it so well that when private investors will come to invest in education in these areas, they will try to compete with the private sector, public sector, by trying to provide the best quality of education they can get. Because they will say, well, these new schools are really doing well, so how can we compete? We need to provide some value added and so on, which might come from training more than education, but in blending part of education along with the just normal curriculum that we have.
Dr. Amar, now, since the COVID-19 pandemic took over the whole world, which is for about a year now, a little bit over a year, now we've seen a change of lifestyle as a whole, and one of the main things was the educational process. We see everyone now studying online, e-learning. all the meetings online, and not just education, but every sort of business aspect. Now, Egypt seemed that it was ready and well prepared to such a surprising change of education. Now, we're talking about the age of digitalization, we're talking about vocational training, we're talking about a totally new, different lifestyle for children and for parents watching their kids learning at home. We've seen even the president give a choice for the parents if they want their kids to finish the whole academic year at home or just continue with it online. So we've shown some sort of a resilience and a level of flexibility within the educational process. How would you rate how we handled the situation, along with compared to the other international communities' educational systems?
Listen, comparatively, we have been doing well, like all the others, which is by itself a lot. You know?
It's an achievement.
Yeah, because we tend to believe that actually advanced countries might perform better. They did not. COVID-19 hit everyone by surprise. And what is actually interesting is that teachers were not ready to teach online, let alone kids to learn online. But teachers are not equipped. They don't know how to package a lecture, a course online, how to give assignments online, grade online, give feedback online. So it was quite a challenge. And it's also a matter of talent. Not everyone can perform well online. Some teachers, before even COVID, had started embedding some, videos, sharing, and speeches, and to educate kids. Listen, this is what was said in a TED talk, or this is what was said on such event by Mr. President, so they have been watching videos already. Some others were just old-fashioned, open the book or write on the board and so on, and they struggle a little bit, and they struggle all over the world, not in Egypt, all over. What actually was interesting to see in Egypt, how reactive the government have been with the measures taken, and also with spread of tablets, with the spread of the improvement actually in bandwidth, so ensure this communication and actually work from home and learn from home, both. So it's a huge demand on the infrastructure, could have been upgraded very fast to cope with this huge demand. It's one of the sectors that have been really booming worldwide, and in Egypt is the telecommunication sector. So I believe, comparatively, this was done well. The idea is that there is no way back. It doesn't mean we're going to continue online only. We're going to have the normal education system where you go to a classroom and so on. But each school, each university will have to have as well all this material packaged online for anyone who is willing to take it online, and also actually even to reach students in areas where education is not very accessible. So you have the content available online, and you just train them on how to absorb it, and you improve the skills of teachers on how to deliver best practice, best learning experience online. And this is moving all over the world. So we'll see some countries innovating, and the advantage of Egypt is how to Arabitize, make the content in Arabic to the Arab world, not to Egypt, to the Arab world. So we can export our knowledge to all the Arab world, because they all need it. So this online education for the private sector as well is really a main source of investment in the coming years. It might be flourishing.
Doctor, because we're running out of time, but one final question now. With this whole development of the public educational system, what would you say are the main challenges or obstacles that we might face and might need to overcome to make this a very successful process?
So time is a concern, because everything takes time, definitely. The other point is how adaptive teachers will be, not students, teachers. Students are very clever. Teachers will be to this transformation, and how can we make sure that we adopt the right mix of expertise from other countries? We talk about the Japanese experience. How can we adapt it with the European one and a little bit, the US with a little bit different approach, to have the right mix for our culture and our people. It's a little bit challenging. It comes with experimentation, so you need to experiment, trial, error, and it takes time.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Kamar has mentioned, it is a process that takes time, but also a process that calls for all Egyptians to be hopeful and aspiring for a better future for the children's and the following next generations. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Bassem Kamar, the leading economist of the European Bank, specialized in the southern and eastern Mediterranean region. Dr. Kamar, it was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.